Welcome to Lantern Voices, a podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. The opinions and information expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Lantern Publishing and Media Incorporated. Welcome back. This is Lantern Voices, a podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. My name is Luisa, and I'll be your host for today's episode with author Dara Lovitz. Dara has been with us for 15 years. She's the author of Muzzling a Movement, a book that first came out in 2010. Its revised edition is coming out this month on November 11th. Muzzling a Movement is a book about the laws that are being created and the laws that have existed for a while with the intent of weakening the work of animal rights activists and to protect those who exploit non-human animals for profit. We talked about the Animal Enterprise Terrorist Act, about egg-gag laws, and about labeling animal rights activism as terrorism. We focus our discussion in American laws, but unfortunately, the US is not the only country with laws like this. We hope you enjoy the episode. Leave your comments down below if you want to join the discussion. And don't forget, Muzzling a Movement, the revised edition, is coming up November 11th. You can buy your copy if you're listening to this podcast after November 11th on lanternpm.org, or you can pre-order your copy on the same website. It's lanternpm.org. Now let's welcome Dara Lovitz to Lantern Voices. Hello, Dara. Welcome to Lantern Voices. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I will like to start with you introducing yourself for our listeners for a little bit. Who are you? How did you find yourself in the animal rights movement? Where are you now? What are you doing? Your plans, your project?
My name is Dara Lovitz, and I'm the author of 5 books, Muzzling a Movement being the most recent one. I am a former trial attorney, and currently I work for a legal nonprofit institute. We focus on education, and I'm also a professor of animal law at the law schools at Temple and Villanova universities.
Oh, nice. Do you enjoy being a professor?
It's the most rewarding job I have, yeah. The most jobs that I enjoy doing don't pay very well. So that's, like nonprofit work and teaching are my favorite things to do. Yeah, I really enjoy it.
And how did you end up in the animal rights movement?
I think I've always been an activist of sorts. And when I learned about the mistreatment of animals and became a vegetarian when I was in middle school, so like around 11 years old, that sort of kickstarted me into animal rights. But I still wasn't even vegan then. I didn't even know about veganism. This is keep in mind, the 90s. So I didn't have access to a lot of information like people do now. So it wasn't until maybe after college that I learned about veganism and what it was. I really thought I was doing the most ethical thing, and I was an activist for animal rights, and I really thought I was doing everything, and I just had no concept of veganism and what it meant. And I can't imagine all the eggs and dairy cows I harmed in high school and college, because that's all I ate was eggs and dairy, as thinking that there was nothing else I could eat. Anyway, so then after I became vegan, I was also just getting out of law school, and I wanted to I thought I could use my legal degree to help animals in some way.
And you've been doing that, so yes.
Trying, yeah. It's not a daily thing, but I certainly like writing about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a continuous project, I think.
It was even after law school, as part of one of the cases I was prosecuting against an egg farm facility, that really helped push me into veganism because I saw how the hens were being treated. But prior to that experience, I really had no idea.
In your book, Muzzling a Movement, you give a very complete scenario of the animal rights movement and a very complete legal, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, so for me it was very complete legal scenario of the laws that we have at the moment that are going on. We have a historical analysis also of the terrorist label. Those are all things that we're going to talk in today's episode. Next question that I have for you is, this book originally came out in 2010. Am I correct? I'm not getting any dates wrong. Okay.
Mhm.
And we are 15 years in after that. It is scary. When I think of 2010, it seems like it was yesterday, but it's been 15 years. Why can we say that this book is still relevant today? In my opinion, in my dream world, it would be a great book to be studied historically one day. So we overcame this. We don't need to talk about this anymore. But we're not there yet. So why is it still a relevant book today?
Right. Unfortunately, animals are still being oppressed. And as long as animals are oppressed, we're going to need animal activists. And as long as we need animal activists, we need animal activists who have unfettered access to saving animals, which they don't at the moment because the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which I wrote about in 2010, is still good law. And by good law, I don't mean it's benevolent. I mean it's law that's authoritative for the courts to rely on, and law enforcement can use it to enforce and execute. So that's what good law means.
Do you know if there's any reason why this is still being enforced? If there's any, had there been any movement trying to stop that, but not being successful? Is it getting worse, getting better?
There are several people who are trying to get it repealed, and it's just been unsuccessful. Years and years of briefs and memos and legal analyses, and we cannot get it repealed. It's been challenged in court, and the courts uphold it. And so there have been definitely attempts to dismantle the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, and they've all been unsuccessful, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's too bad to hear. Do you know any of the main updates for this revised edition?
For the book?
Yeah, for the one that's coming out now in November, there's any major updates that you
Oh,
had to
yeah.
change?
I included a lot of information about ag-gag laws, which are legislation that have been passed since 2010 when I wrote the book initially. And then I have a lot of analyses of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act cases that happened after 2010. And I have a whole section on the animal rights movement, like the state of the animal rights movement, how it's changed over the past decade and a half, and what we're doing well, what we're maybe not doing well, and some look towards the future.
That's nice to hear. Are you familiar with the book that we brought out last fall, Censor Landscapes by Isabella LaRocca Gonzalez?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
It's a nice read. I mean, it's kind of heartbreaking sometimes, but it is a nice read because she talks a lot about how the ag-gag laws impacted her work as a photographer. And
Oh,
when we
wow.
had her over, in the podcast, it was something I wasn't expecting to hear. And she mentioned that it was very hard for her to go there and take the photos. And she wasn't taking photos of any of the individuals, she was just taking landscape photos. And even so, she would get folks threatening to sue using the law because the law was on their side. So
Mhm.
it's a very interesting book. It's mainly a photography book, but she talks about it in the text that she has throughout it.
That's a shame. Yeah, even just any, it doesn't even matter the intent of going onto the property. Do you want to talk about ag-gag laws now? Is this, or should we talk about it
Um,
at another point?
we can, we're flowing, so yes, we can definitely
Okay.
continue on this topic.
So, for any listeners who are hearing about it for the first time, ag-gag laws they're agricultural facilities protection statutes, and they basically criminalize the behavior of someone who would trespass onto a property or gain access to a farm property or agricultural facility, and then take recording, either audio or video, still images, whatever. So it criminalizes that behavior, and that behavior, if people know the history of a lot of statutes, animal protective statutes or animal welfare laws, they came about because of video that was recorded on farms showing, for instance, downer cows, which are very sick cows. They're too sick to even stand up. Someone had video footage of that, and that changed the whole lunch meat program for children that year. So, and there was a whole legislation about downer animals that was passed based on that. So a lot of our welfare laws, which we can argue whether or not they're even beneficial for animals, but they purport to help animals and to save them, and they're all because of video that came out behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So those videos wouldn't be possible if ag-gag laws were enforced in every state across the country.
It makes sense in an evil way.
Yeah, the agricultural facilities don't want this getting out there. Number one, it could reveal their animal abusive practices, but it goes into the world of labor. It could show labor violations, work safety hazards, environmental issues. Like, so much can go wrong if a farm just lets people come in and record what's going on behind those walls. So I can understand why farms wouldn't want activists coming onto their property and taking recordings. It makes a lot of sense. And a lot of good change happens when we have access to what happens behind those walls.
There's many ways for us to show what's happening, and sometimes photos, videos are the more effective ones because of how graphic and how real they look. I don't know how that's going to change now in the age of AI, where we're never sure if something has been fabricated or not. But I think that's why the work the activists are doing out there is even more important now. And the work that authors and publishers, I don't want to toot too much our own horn, but like publishers like Lantern and other
Of
publishers are
course.
doing
Yeah.
this work to bring books and materials that we know for a fact are real. They're not absolutely not AI generated, absolutely not somebody came up with like a fictional idea and published. No, we're almost an exclusively nonfiction publisher. I think our own one exception is for our children's books, and even so, most of them are based on real life events. So yeah, we're gonna have to find alternative paths to go around this.
Yeah, absolutely. You should toot your own horn. You guys do great work, and you bring important information to the public. So I think you should toot away. And it's so if I ask most people, at least my generation, what made you go vegan, it usually goes back to an image that they saw. For me, it was these PETA brochures where it showed animals suffering and, in these little crates. And I thought, oh, I can't eat meat anymore. I was a little kid. I was impressionable. But it was those images. And other people say, oh, I watched Earthlings and I went vegan. Or I saw Forks Over Knives or Game Changers or Cowspiracy, one of the myriad videos out there or movies or series about animal rights and how animals are treated. So most people I know who went vegan because of an image, either a video or a picture or whatever. So yeah, the idea that images could be computer generated and fake, and now we have to worry about the authenticity of them is super upsetting to think about. I hope people can trust the images that they see and know that the ones, at least of animals being abused, are accurate, because that is happening.
That is, yes, absolutely. For me, though, it was always books.
Mm.
I first became vegetarian also in middle school. And it was because of a book that was not a vegan book. It was a fiction book for children. And they had one scene that was very graphic, describing a hunter in the woods. But the scene was written under the perspective of the animals in those woods.
Wow.
So I don't know why the author decided to do that, but it was something that stayed with me. And I was already trying to reduce all sorts of animal products that I had in life before that. But after reading that book, I had to sit down and talk with my mom because I was 13
Hmm.
and then I became vegetarian. And veganism is still a journey for me, and that is mostly due to Lantern's books and talking in the podcast, chatting with the authors, getting tips from my colleagues here at Lantern, because especially Megan, she works in social media as well with me, so we work together a lot. And she's been vegan for a while. She's raising her kids vegan, and she has like, "Oh, you don't know what to do for dinner? Here, I have some tips. I have some ideas." So yeah, books and community has been helping me a lot.
That's amazing. I mean, sometimes all it takes for me, it was a piece of vegan cheesecake that my friend Layla made that made me real. Because up until then, I was like, I would be vegan, except I can't give up cheese, which is like obviously
Mhm.
something that every non-vegan says. And she made a homemade vegan cheesecake and it was amazing. And I thought, wow, if I could have something like this and not hurt animals, and I'm not giving up anything. I'm really not giving up anything. And I've been vegan ever since. That was more than 20, maybe 23, 24 years ago. So, yes, sometimes all it takes is like a good food. So it's good that you have someone cooking for
Yeah.
you and giving you recipes.
I mean, I have to cook for myself, but they're definitely giving me all the tips and tricks that they can find. And now I
Amazing.
want the magical cheesecake recipe as well.
I can
But
send
back
it to
to
you. I still
oh,
have
please
it.
do. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's like 25-year-old recipe that still holds up. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Yes. And I don't know, I feel like listeners will also want it, so maybe I'll tag in the podcast description.
No problem.
We know the vegan activist community is out there, and we want to connect with each and every one of you. We are proud supporters of initiatives that fight for a more compassionate world for all animals, humans and non-humans alike. For more content on vegan activism, follow Lantern on social media. We are Lantern Publishing and Media on Facebook, at Lantern PM on Instagram, and at Lantern PM Official on TikTok. When I started reading a book, I knew very, very little about the terrorist label in animal rights movement. what I knew was something or another that sometimes comes up in our production meetings at Lantern. I was reading the foreword almost as somebody who had no clue what was going on there. And I wanted to go into the book that way. So I would have experience that other readers might be having. And the FBI is mentioned as the organization that polices animal rights activists. And I was like, why? It sounds, when you talk about what that movement was doing, and it is doing sometimes, and like rescuing animals, it came to me an expression that we use a lot here in Brazil when we're talking about petty thief, like petty thief, petty crime, which is like the chicken thief, somebody who literally would go inside people's houses and get their chickens away. So I'm like, it's that plus ethics. So why is the FBI there? So how did the terrorist label came to be? I know you talk about this in the book a little bit, but I want people who are listening to us to read the book. So let's give them a little teaser.
It's upsetting to think about, but it starts with activists liberating animals from abusive situations. So pharmaceutical labs mostly, and mink farms and fur farms, they were doing this for decades until they started to cause real economic damage. When you cause economic damage to a powerful corporation, they get lawmakers involved. And then when lawmakers get involved and draft a federal statute, then the federal law enforcement, the FBI, gets involved. And the terrorist label didn't really show up until the last 20 years, I'd say. It wasn't always the case. They were they were called radicals or extremists. Terrorism really became a term of art after the Patriot Act, after September 11th, 2001, when America suffered that devastating, well, we now call it a terrorist attack, right? The USA Patriot Act coined the concept of domestic terrorism. Up until then, we had laws about international terrorism, and now we have this concern about things happening on our land, on our soil. Interestingly, there are several different definitions of terrorism, but they may mostly include violence for a political ideology or something. And using the terrorist label to prosecute animal rights activists serves to oppress them even further, because then you can have you can have sentencing, enhanced sentencing guidelines. So in other words, a sentence for a non-terrorist wouldn't be as severe as a sentence for terrorists. So they'd be in jail for longer, and it's a more serious crime. They've had certain designations. They wouldn't be able to fly. So being labeled a terrorist is no small thing. It really elevates the crime. And again, when animal rights activists caused economic damage to these powerful corporations, that's what started all of this. Unfortunately, you make an impact and then they bite back.
I see. Yeah. In the end, it's capitalism.
Correct.
And also the fact that animals are seen as property.
Right. So but animals are definitely legally property, right? So taking an animal, rescuing an animal from a pharmaceutical lab, and then adopting them out is conversion of property. We call it conversion, which is theft. Like you're taking someone's property and taking it away from them. That's a petty crime. Like theft if I went into your house and stole a chair, like that's really not, it's just trespass and it's theft. So that's all this is. This is property theft. And yet, because of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, now there's political motives behind it. Now it can be considered violent because sometimes there's intimidation involved in certain animal rights movements, and it just gets elevated for what really should just be like a petty misdemeanor crime.
Can you mention some examples, those crimes there to show? I want to show our listeners how it's such a big stretch to put something as simple as rescuing an animal into a category that is so everybody has a feeling when they hear the word terrorist. So can you mention some examples of like this big stretch that's being done?
Examples that led to an AETA charge?
Yes.
An animal enterprise terrorism? Okay. Yeah. Well, just breaking into a fur farm and releasing the minks into the wild is animal enterprise terrorism. Usually activists will cross state lines, which means that now you're in it's something called interstate commerce. Like if you cross state lines to do something, then the federal government has jurisdiction over it. So let's say you drive from California to Iowa and you break into a fur farm and open the cages and release the minks into the wild or the foxes into the wild. That's a crime of animal enterprise terrorism. The animal enterprise is the fur farm. And the terrorism is that you've damaged them. You've caused economic harm to this animal enterprise by quote unquote stealing their property, right? And that's could be millions of dollars, especially on a fur farm that they have lost now because you've released their product, their commodity. And so by saving all those animals, you've committed this serious crime of Animal and Enterprise Terrorism Act just by saving animals.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that the label terrorism allows the law to have a stricter control over those people and catch them more easily, correct?
Catch them easily, and then once they're caught, if they're prosecuted, the penalty could be much higher and more serious. And anytime you federalize what otherwise is a state crime, so let's say like this is an example I give my students, and it has to do with arson. Let's say there's a divorce situation between a man and a woman, and the man burns down the marital home. No one's in it. No one gets hurt. It's just a building burns to the ground. He burns it to the ground because he's pissed at his ex-wife. That would be a state crime of arson. And he would maybe probably get jail time. He destroyed property, whatever. But that's a state crime. So he'd be prosecuted in state court by a state prosecutor. He'd go to a jail, a prison within the state boundaries. Now, let's say an animal activist burns down a building where animal testing is taking place. No animals are in it. No humans are in it. Nobody is harmed. It's like the same thing. You're basically setting fire to a building and the building burns to the ground. But this isn't a state crime because it's an animal enterprise that's being harmed by it. So now it's elevated to the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. Now it's a violation of a federal statute. And when they're brought into court, they're brought in front of a grand jury, which like more than 95% of grand jury hearings result in indictments. And then they get prosecuted in a federal court. And then they're sentenced to way more years in prison than if you just did this not petty, but the state crime of arson. And you'd be sent to a federal prison. It could be 3,000 miles from your home. Whereas again, if you did a state crime, you're only in prison in your state. Your family can visit you. Your friends can visit you. With a federal crime of terrorism, if you set fire to a building, again, no humans are hurt. We're not talking murder. We're talking property damage, just like the man who burned down the house. So it's just property damage. And they could be sent to a prison, again, across the country in a federal prison. Nobody can visit you. People would have to fly to visit you. You are just totally isolated. So anytime you are convicted of a federal crime, it just carries so much more serious consequences than if you're convicted of a state crime. And the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act is a federal crime. So it just elevates everything.
Thank you. That's very clear. And that leads me to the book title. The title is Muzzling a Movement. I've been thinking lately about I study communication just because I'm a journalist and it's the area that I graduated from and all that. So I've been reading about the paradox of tolerance by Karl Popper, and I've been reading the theories of like the spirals of silence, spheres of discourse, and all of them kind of talk a little bit in different ways from different perspectives. They talk about this phenomenon in which an individual silences themselves in order not to suffer consequences from the law, consequences from the community they are part of, from people that they believe are oppressing them, regardless. And you talk in your book about a self-muzzle phenomenon. With all those harsh laws, with all that persecution, I wouldn't be surprised if there is fear in the animal rights activist movement nowadays. Do you feel like there is a self-muzzle phenomenon going on?
Yeah, that's my concern, that people are going to be fearful of acting on behalf of animals because they face this risk of prosecution. Now, Peter Young, whom I cite in my book a lot, doesn't believe this should be even a factor. Like if you look at all the people liberating animals across the country and then compare it to the number of people actually prosecuted for releasing animals, it's like it shows that there's really not a serious risk. If you get caught, serious consequences. But the risk of getting caught is where he focuses. And he's like, if you just think about the chance of getting caught, you really shouldn't be fearful of helping an animal. But yes, I do fear that some people look at the possibility of prosecution, and I wouldn't judge them. I also am fearful. I'm a rule follower anyway, and I'm also riddled with anxiety most days. So I'm not a hero. So I don't blame anyone who feels like a little inhibited and scared to break the law. But yes, that's absolutely a phenomenon, is that the movement is going to be, it's going to silence itself. And I almost don't want to place the onus on the activists themselves, but the people who are prosecuting the activists, they're the ones silencing us. So it is kind of like, I know it's a little different from these, the spiral of silence and the, um, what was the other one? The paradox
Of tolerance.
of tolerance, right? So I think it's a little different in the sense that there's another. I don't want to victim blame here, and I really believe that the wrongdoers are the ones that are unfairly prosecuting the animal rights movement for saving
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. And that's why we say that there's technically not a self muzzle. They're still being muzzled, but just by external
Hmm.
factors.
Right.
And yeah, this is one of the most dystopic qualities of the way that our system in general, I know I'm in a different country right now, but it's not much different here in that aspect, is how we manage to create something that makes people be so afraid that they don't act. And they then put the blame on themselves. Like, I'm choosing not to, and you're not. There's so many other things happening. In Brazil, for example, we talk about that a lot when it comes to reproductive rights, because that's still an issue here. And I know it's coming back in the US, but in here, it's still a crime to interrupt a pregnancy. It is. So many people say, oh, that woman chose to have a baby, but did she? Or did she just didn't have any other options?
Uh-huh.
So it is always a matter to be thought of. And it is interesting that you brought Peter Young, correct?
Yes.
This perspective of it is not, you were not going to get caught. Still, I'm also a rule follower, also anxiety, my best friend over here. And that would still freak me out. But I'm glad to know that there are people who are brave enough to go ahead and keep doing the good work, even though uh, if they get caught, the consequences are going to be bad.
Yeah, and people who do it think that even if I get caught and I spend some time in prison, I've released so many animals from their own prison, and wasn't it worth it? And, there are those of us on the planet who are risk averse and others who are risk takers. And I think we all have a place in our movement. And
Hmm.
as long as the risk takers keep doing the things they're doing to save animals, and those of us who are risk averse do what we can from the sidelines to help them, I think we're all contributing in a meaningful way to the movement.
That's beautiful. With that being said, we always like to end the episode with a moment of hope, and you end the book with a hopeful tone. So the last chapter is called "The Movement Unmuzzled." What is the hopeful message that we can see for the animal rights activists now in 2025?
I just think I use the example of cheese in the book because 20 years ago you had to go to a specialty food store to find vegan cheese, and not a selection of vegan cheese, but the one vegan cheese product that existed back then. And now you can go into a mainstream supermarket, I'm not talking Whole Foods. I'm saying like a mainstream supermarket, and on a shelf, there are anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 different types of vegan cheeses. That means that there are more companies making vegan cheese, and that they've become so mainstream and popular that even these mainstream supermarkets are carrying them because they have a market for them. I think that speaks volumes. I think it speaks volumes that you go to a restaurant now and there are clearly labeled vegan items plural. And it's not just the garden salad, but sometimes there'll be an impossible burger or or impossible nuggets or something. And just even the fact that there's a vegan label on a menu shows that veganism is growing. People are growing or understanding more. I love the fact that we have social media where young kids can gain access to videos of animals and animals being harmed, and they can gain an awareness in a way that there's no way I could have when I was growing up. So I'm just hopeful that with the advent of new technologies and the increasing awareness of animal cruelty and the increasing availability of vegan foods, that veganism is within our reach. I mean, widespread veganism.
You're right. That's something hopeful. When I first started, first as a vegetarian here in my hometown, I remember struggling very, very hard going with my family for like lunch or dinners and stuff. And now it is super easy.
Amazing. I love hearing that. That's great.
Oh, Mara, thank you very much for being here with us today. Is there any projects, anything you're working on that you would like us to share with our listeners?
You're already going to share the information for the book, Muzzling a Movement?
Yes, I am on the podcast description, and this whole episode is about it. So, yes.
Okay, great. Let's go with that then. Buy the book.
Amazing.
It's really different from the first one. I don't know if your listeners have read the first one, but this is like, I don't want to say improved because I really think the first one is awesome, but it has more information and different information. It's almost, I don't know how, I'm really bad at percentages, maybe like 50% longer than the first one. It's chock full of information that's relevant today for today. It still has the historical information and the historical background to these animal enterprise, these terrorism laws, and it traces the history of the animal rights movement. So there's still history, but it also takes you into today's world of animal activism, including, like I said, ag-gag laws and current iterations of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, and then what the Supreme Court has done in this world of free speech and First Amendment analysis. So it covers a lot of modern stuff and it takes you through. So it's super relevant in 2025 and beyond. And I hope your listeners find it as enjoyable to read as it was for me to write.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. While I was doing the research for this podcast, I found folks on the internet, one or two people. The comment was a few years old, but they were looking for the full version of the first edition and for like college papers, university work. So I'm pretty sure that they're going to be very happy to find a new and improved edition.
That's great. Yeah, I hope I can find them and send them a copy.
Sarah, thank you very much for your time and for your words here today. You're always
Thank you,
welcome
Louisa.
back here on Lantern Voices. And I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great day.
You too. Thanks, Louisa. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us here at Lantern Voices today. This was our interview with Dara Lovitz, author of Muzzling a Movement. The book is coming out now this month on November 11th. If you want to pre-order a copy, you can go to lanternpm.org. The link is down here in the podcast description, and you'll be able to access the book's page. If you're listening to this episode after November 11th, then you can head over to lanternpm.org and select your preferred store to buy your copy of Muzzling a Movement. If you're a recurring listener here in Lantern Voices, you already know about this, but if there's anybody new out there, we wanted to let you know that you have 25% off in our ebook store on lanternpm.org. If you head over to our ebook store, select any of the books ever featured here in the podcast, and then on checkout, you use the coupon LanternVoices25, and you'll get 25% off any ebook ever featured here in the podcast. But pay attention, this is only valid for ebooks and only for our website. The link is here in the podcast description. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next month for our last Lantern Voices episode of the year. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at LanternPM, on TikTok at LanternPMOfficial, on Facebook at Lantern Publishing and Media. We're also on Blue Sky as lanternpm.bsky.social. And now we are on Patreon. So if you want to support our work, the work that we do here in the podcast, the work that we do at Lantern with all the vegan books, you can go to Patreon and select one of our membership. Depending on the membership that you choose, you can support us with $5 a month, $30 a month, $45 a month. The highest tier is $45 a month. And depending on the tier that you choose, you'll not only support us and support our work monthly, you will also get some perks in return. Our Patreon link is also down here in the podcast description, and I hope you check it out. Thanks once again for being here with us today, and see you next month. Goodbye.